I think hopefully we're live. Hopefully I didn't mess it up that quick, you guys. It just started. I'll just ramble for a little bit. I'm Kelly Garrett. I'm not Sarah Nicholas. They have something else going on, so you guys are stuck with me. If you guys don't know who I am a former mentee. I was also a former mentor, former managing director on the Pitch Wars board. So I can definitely kind of chime in with any questions you guys might have about Pitch Wars in terms of rules and regulations. If this is your first time, you don't know what Pitch Wars is, it's an online mentoring program where more established writers and publishing professionals, they spend 3 months helping an unagented writer revise their completed manuscript. And so it opens for applicants, I think September 26th. I could be wrong. Check the website, pitchwars.org, to make sure. And so we've been having these wonderful chats that Sarah has been doing where we get to talk to mentors. And so today we have 3 really amazing middle grade mentors who are going to answer your questions, give your advice. And how it's going to work is we'll actually have the 2 chats. So from 7 to 8, we'll have these 3 lovely people. And then at 8, we'll have 3 more mentors to come in and also answer questions. So hopefully you guys can all stay for the whole 2 hours if you're watching. So if you have a question, now's a good time to ask it. It's the best thing to do is head to the YouTube. So if you're on Twitter right now, click through to YouTube and you can ask your question in the box and I'll see it and I'll put it on the screen and they will answer it. So start putting your questions in now, and I'm going to ask the mentors to introduce themselves. But first, I have to thank 2 people. J.A. Crawford is on Twitter right now monitoring the feed. So if you do ask questions on Twitter, he will find it. I love that Jennifer's doing all this. I just got it. She's live now. So hopefully that means I haven't been talking for 2 minutes and no one's been listening to me. I think I might have been talking for 2 minutes and no one was listening to me. You guys, I don't know. I'm just going to start over again because I'm pretty sure I just started live. Okay, so I did a whole spiel and it was amazing. It was life-changing and we missed it because I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, I'm Kelly. I'm not Sarah. They have something else to do. You're stuck with me. I am a former mentee, a former mentor, longtime board member. I was a managing director. If this is your first time doing Pitch Wars, it is an online mentoring program where more established authors and publishing professionals spend 3 months helping an unagented writer revise a completed manuscript. Submissions open end of September, I think September 26th, but head to pitchwars.org to confirm that. And we are doing these amazing chats that Sarah has organized where we have mentors come with us and answer your questions. So if you guys have questions, you should definitely put them in the box. The best thing to do is to go to the YouTube. So if you're on Twitter right now, click through. I see a question. Click through and ask it at YouTube. If not, we have Jay Crawford who's watching the Twitter to bring the questions over. We also have DT who's monitoring the feed. Oh, they did hear the spiel. So you heard it twice. I've already messed it up, but we're good. So what we're going to do right now is you guys ask questions. And we're going to let the mentors introduce themselves. So, Jennifer, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer. I am one half of Team Krakenbee, and I have a mug that I'm going to try to show people in the light. Oh, that's how cameras work. Oh, she's beautiful.
We're killing it. We're killing it tonight,
so
guys.
I am mentoring middle grade with my friend Kim Long. We are looking for anything with a speculative bent this year, and we can talk about what speculative means, but speculative in any direction, as long as it's speculative. What else am I supposed to say? I'm so jazzed to be here.
Just start over like I did.
So jazzed to be here. I was a Pitch Wars mentee, and then I've been.
What class were you?
I was class of 2017, proud member.
That's a cool class.
And I have been mentoring with Kim ever since. This is going to be our 4th year mentoring together, and I think it's her 6th year mentoring total. So
nice.
That's us.
Nice. I'm glad you're here. So, Julie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Julie. I'm calling in from just outside of Seattle, Washington. I'm also mentoring middle grade, speculative and contemporary, if it's issue-driven and covers some of my favorite issues, which would be basically anything dealing with an underrepresented voice, something in verse, something about puberty, specifically send me the puberty books. Yes. This is my 5th year mentoring for Pitch Wars, and I was a mentee in 2015.
Oh,
So,
nice. That's a good year too.
yeah, it was a great year, and I'm very, very excited to be here. Love Pitch Wars and love the community here.
Awesome. Thanks for coming to this and also for mentoring. Sylvia, you want to take us home?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Sylvia Liu, calling in from Virginia. This is my 2nd year mentoring for Pitch Wars, and I think I'm taking almost every genre. I'm taking fantasy, science fiction, horror, and contemporary, as well as graphic novels. Probably the only categories I'm not really taking are verse novels and historical fiction. And I was a mentee for a different program, Author Mentor Match, and then became a mentor for that program and then switched over to Pitch Wars. And I've just loved working with the mentees I've worked with, and looking forward to chatting with you all.
Awesome. So we do have some questions already. You guys ready to start?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to show this question. There it is. All right. I did that right. So this is from Catherine. The question is, when writing an upper MG horror, how dark is too dark that you would pass automatically?
Ooh, this is a really good question. I think, so it's really hard to answer it without reading as well, but I would say read a lot in the genre if you can. We have a list of horror books on our wish list, like Small Spaces, and a lot of great ones just came out this year. The Stitchers and Hide and Seekers and a bunch of others that I can't think of right now. But I think if you're reading a lot in genre and you're like, my book is markedly scarier than these, or a lot like bloodier or gorier than these, I would maybe pause. But if it seems to be of the realm, then that you're probably on the right track.
Yeah, I think you guys definitely check out Wishlist. We have an accessible spreadsheet this year, which you can use to kind of narrow down by your genre, but still check out the Wishlist because like she was saying, it has a lot more detail about the mentors, both what they like and also their mentoring style. So Julie, anyone else want to answer this question?
Yeah, I'm really a little bit of a chicken, and I am actually somebody who finds really scary stories too terrifying. They give me nightmares. So I'm definitely on the side of more like creepy, spooky ghost story versus something with a lot of jump scares and something like that. And that's not to say that kids are definitely really into more creepy stuff, but I personally am too chicken.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say definitely like I'm okay with really scary and dark, but probably not so much with gore or sort of like on the page violence, but definitely like, real like creepiness is fine.
Okay, those are all good answers. So the next question is from MJ Writer. I know a lot of people talk about the level of work that needs to be done. How grueling do you think this process is? That's a very interesting question. I would love to, I think George should up. I would love to get your opinions on this. And also, we do have another mentor who showed up, so I'm going to add him to the stream. Hi, George.
George.
So we're just answering some questions right now. So, George, if you want to answer a question later, definitely introduce yourself first. But I'm just going to keep going with this. So, anyone wants to talk about how you think how grueling the process is, especially because you guys, a couple of you have been mentees before.
I mean,
I guess I'll start. Go ahead.
You go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, as a mentee, I rewrote like a third of my book. I think some of my class rewrote their entire book in the window for whatever reason. But it's a lot of work. And with middle grade, the word count is smaller, but a third of a middle grade book is still a very substantial portion of text. And I would say a third is kind of conservative for some people's edits. Our mentee last year decided to change his narrator and rewrote every single word.
Yeah, I think you should be prepared to really like dig into very big changes, like, plot level changes, changing character arcs, like we're going to be asking that level of changes. Like if a manuscript comes in that's almost too polished, that only needs like line edits, we'll probably tell them, you're ready to query, or you can just get, a critique partner to polish it up for you. I think what we like to do is help you bring your manuscript to the next level, but in a very significant way.
Yeah, our mentee last year described working with, last year I co-mentored, which is why I'm saying us and we. It described working with us as like a fast forward MFA. So I would expect that to continue this year with with my style. I'm a little bit infamous for the long edit letters. And we did have a mentee one year that rewrote every single scene in their book except for one. So that, yeah, if you're thinking buff and polish and I'm almost ready to go, I'm not the best mentor for you because I'm likely to really dig in and ask for some big changes.
George, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. An awesome response, everyone. Sorry, my grandma came short notice. I had to like politely usher her out and be like,
"Oh no, don't give it to grandma."
I'm George Jreije. I write MG fantasy. You know, I'm a Lebanese American. My books reflect that culture. Humbled to be here. I was a former Pitch Wars mentee. Now it's my second time mentoring with the program. And just to quickly answer this question, I mean, wherever you are in your process, what LQ, my co-mentor, and I are really looking for is something that really resonates with us. So whether you're really close or you're not quite there, we'll take on somebody who's like really needs a lot of work to scale them up, because the goal eventually is not necessarily to get an agent, but just to get to the next level. And we're confident we can do that for you. And we're just humbled to have the opportunity.
I will say that we do encourage mentors to ask questions before to people that they're interested in and kind of give them a sense to kind of see what their thoughts are, but I would say just be prepared to expect to be writing every day and to rewrite, so go in expecting it to be super grueling and then, be surprised if it's not. So next question is actually from Joseph, who's our Twitter captain. And his question is, middle grade is such a formative time. Is there a middle grade story that was formative for you? There's a slight tweak on what's your favorite. Well, I think you stumped them.
I know I've got one. I just didn't want to be pushy because I'm bossy.
Oh, go! I like bossy.
She's not bossy. She's a leader.
It was definitely The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for me. I spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to get to Narnia, like literally going in closets past the age where one might find that to be appropriate. I still secretly hope if I see a wardrobe that I might actually get to those pine boughs and the snow and the little lamp but anyway. Thus, I write fantasy. Surprise, surprise.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, this is controversial, but I didn't actually read MG when I started writing it. I think that my mental state is so childish that it just was very easy. But I would definitely say Ghost by Jason Reynolds. When I read that, I was just like, this is next level. This is where I need to get in order to get published. And every time I read something by Jason, it's just complete shock and awe because he absorbs you and the voice is so strong. And that's why when I take on mentees, I really the number one area of focus is let's help you unlock your voice and find your voice so that everything else will be built around that. And so I think that was a very formative experience for me as a writer.
Okay. Anyone else?
I guess one of my favorite all-time middle grade was Something Wicked This Way Comes from Ray Bradbury. It was just one of those that just felt like you were in a different world. And so it was speculative, it was creepy. But there are all these other books that I read and reread, like the Lloyd Alexander series. I loved those as well. So
I think mine is The Golden Compass. I mean, I had a lot of books that I reread. That or Harriet the Spy, I think, were my most often rereads, just constantly as a kid.
All right, those are all great answers. I don't read. I'm not gonna lie, I'm an adult author, so I don't read middle grade, but they all sound great. So it sounds like I might have to start with all four of those. So next question is from Chad Simmons. He says, my work in progress, a chapter book, opens with 840 words before dialogue begins. Should I fix this now? Too much info dump? And then the second question, I guess you snuck two in here, chat. I'm struggling with action scenes, specifically death being described. So what do you guys want to maybe start with the first question? And you think 840 words is too much before dialogue begins in middle grade?
That's like what, 3 pages? It really depends on your story. I mean, if the character is a very reserved character and doesn't speak too often, but we get a sense of the world through their vision in a very strong way, then I think it's fine. I've read a lot of great stories where there's not a lot of dialogue, or the point of view character is not necessarily a talker. But generally speaking, if they are, then get us to their voice. Let us hear them, see them in action. So whatever you can do to get us there is the most critical thing. If it's really an info dump, if it's a lot of backstory that you're talking about and not plot and action, then yes, cut the info. Like, weave that in naturally so that we're learning the information along the way. We're being taken on a journey. Otherwise, I wouldn't sweat it too much unless it's not part of your character's personality.
My only also hesitation with your question is if you say you're a chapter book, to me that sounds like a much lower word count overall. Middle grade has a higher word count, but to me, chapter book implies like 20,000 words or something. And if that is the case, 840 might be a little bit long before you got into dialogue.
Right. For a chapter book, that's really probably more than a chapter of without dialogue, which might be kind of tricky to pull off. But I'm thinking, actually, Jennifer, I think the Golden Compass, doesn't it start with her running through Oxford? And I don't think she says anything, Lyra, for a while. Like, she's running across the rooftops for multiple pages. So if you're immersing in the action, I think that's what's more important than whether you've got dialogue or something else. Like, if you're immersing us in a scene or in a moment,
that's totally actually work. True. Yeah, she's sneaking around, so she has to be quiet.
Right,
so she can't say anything, but you're getting a lot of really rich world building. A couple other characters might be talking in her earshot, and I can't quite remember, but that's definitely a quieter beginning, but really rich world building wise. So I guess it depends.
Yeah, I think a lot of the answers, it depends on the work. Do you guys have any advice on how to describe death?
That's a really tough one.
You guys, I'm a mystery writer. I should be able to help him out, but Chad, I'm sorry.
Also, it's like death, and if that's in a chapter book too, that might be really young kiddos. So I don't know if those are in the same story, but if a chapter book is like for kids, I don't know, like 7 to 9, I would say carefully and delicately. I'm not sure. It's hard to see without seeing your material.
Yeah, my sense is that in a lot of middle grade books, death occurs, but usually off the page, so it's the effect of a parent's death or, something like that. But it's not that often you actually see the literal action.
Yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to go to the next question, so you can answer.
Okay. I mean, there is death in my book, though the character is 12 years old, so it's more just straight middle grade as opposed to chapter book age. The way to approach it is if it's real, approach it delicately and just have a respect for it, and I don't think you should worry. Obviously, if there's excessive violence or any of that, then I would question, the theme and kind of the age category. Typically, middle grade doesn't lean too heavily into that. But if it's like a family member dying, or if that's a conversation that's happening, then imagine how it might happen in real life, and then pursue it that way.
Awesome. All right. So the next question, I'm actually going to answer it. So it's from Alexander Williams. They say, do you require the work in progress to be completed to take part in pitch wars? And if yes, how complete is complete draft 3 ready to query? So yes, you have to have a completed manuscript. Some people try to, I think, get past the system, but mentors can ask to request the full manuscript from day after subs end till the end. So definitely have the manuscript completed. it's hard to say when a manuscript is complete. You know, for me personally, and you guys can also answer this, it's when I have done all I can with one book and there's nothing else I can do and I need extra eyes on it. To me, that's a completed manuscript. So usually to me, that's like my second draft. But again, it just really depends on you. But do you guys have any advice on when you consider a manuscript to be complete?
I agree with you 100%, Kelly. Like for me, I just remember going back and being a mentee myself and applying to Pitch Wars. I had actually had, a couple of agents who were interested already, and I thought, I'd gone through the ringer, had my CPs look at it, had a lot of folks, read the manuscript, give me critique, and revised it per that critique. So I was confident I could query that manuscript actually. Had I not gone into Pitch Wars. And I think that for me is what ready is. I will say that my mentee last year had a manuscript that I wouldn't say was query ready. So different folks have different definitions of what that means, and I wouldn't stress it too much as long as the story is all there.
People like get mad at this, but for me, it's like if you have like a lot of typos and really like things like that, that to me makes me think that you kind of rushed it, so it should definitely, if like you have read it a couple times and like you just didn't like finish it and set the end and then like send it off to everyone, so I think that should also be taken into account. Anyone else?
Yeah, for me, if we're spending all of our time on the kind of basic 101 level, low hanging fruit, you're not really getting the full advantage of working with me. So if you can do that stuff, like you can even be working on that right now. You can be reading craft books, reading about revision. I really, really love Cheryl Klein's The Magic Words. That's a book that you might get assigned as homework if you work with me. And it has some really good techniques for revising. Like there's time right now to get some polishing done and get that manuscript as close to query ready as you're able. You may learn that it wasn't ready and that you did have more stuff to do, but at least if in the back of your mind it's not ready and there's a major problem, there's always next year.
Anyone else?
Yeah, for me, I agree. I think definitely not your first like zero draft that you vomited out, but at least one revision after that, I'd say. But you can be aware that like, oh, my plot is not working, but I can't figure out why. Or, that's fine for me. I think it doesn't have to be query ready, but it does need to be enough so that there's a shape of a story, I guess.
Yeah. In fact, like when if we ask people for extra pages, the whole manuscript, a question we ask people in an email is like, what do you think in the book needs improvement? Like, why are you looking for mentorship? And usually the answers are really illuminating. So like, you don't have to think your book is perfect. You can be like, I'm having trouble incorporating an emotional arc or whatever your trouble is. But as good as you can make it, I think would be a nice way to see it.
Yeah, I think I should clarify what I said. It sounded really harsh. I don't mean that you think the book is perfect, right? Like, I don't think that my current manuscript is perfect and it's getting sent out to people, right? What I mean is you've done everything that you know how to do.
Yeah,
like if you know that you've got an extra point of view that doesn't need to be there and you just haven't cut it out yet, like do that now before the window opens. And then we can really focus in on the stuff that you don't know how to fix yet. Right. And we can focus on that.
You want to present your best work to people always, and so including in Pitch Wars. So, all right, next question from MJ, writer. My submission is going to be dealing with processing death in a fantasy world with an MC who has a lot of tears. Is that something you feel kids, MGers need? I'm assuming like stories about processing death. I think that's the question.
I think,
Julie, are you going to talk about Jessica's book?
I literally.
Julie,
I guess I would just say, like as long as you're dealing with a subject like that, honestly, middle grade kids, readers definitely need that kind of book, because you're helping them process important issues.
I mean, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. I think a lot more middle grade kids than we ever had expected have experienced death in the last year and a half. And I will say that I've got this listed on my wish list. My amazing previous co-mentor, Jessica Vitalis's book, The Wolf's Curse, is all about grief. And it's such a fabulous book, and it comes out Tuesday.
Happy Release Day.
Yeah. So I'm all in for tackling tough topics. I think fantasy is a great way into that because you can do things with magic to make it feel a little bit easier to process.
Yeah, just echoing what everyone said. Fantastic advice, and there are a lot of books out there that handle this really well. I would just seek them out and just study what they do.
I don't know who this person is. Hopefully, whoever they are, they did not see the beginning of this chat. Hopefully not. But Sarah, Nicholas wants to know, if you could co-write with any author, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh my God. Sarah.
I'm gonna.
Thanks for throwing the ringer question.
That's a good one.
I don't know if this counts, but I've always wanted to rewrite The Hobbit from Smaug's perspective, which wouldn't be co-writing, and it would also be totally illegal, and I would get sued by Tolkien's entire family. But that's my dream book, is Smaug in verse.
You took mine, Julie. That's not fair. I was gonna say I would like to co-write books in the Lord of the Rings universe, but with diversity. And I think that would be like the only thing I can think of that would really elevate that kind of IP for me, because that's really my introduction to reading was Lord of the Rings. I think a lot of fantasy authors, that's the case. But just injecting some diversity into that world would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Anyone
Absolutely.
else?
Yeah, I don't know. I would probably go really old school. Like little kid me read Jane Eyre a lot, and it was like that was like the darkness I appreciated. At like 10, I was like, yes, this is life. And I think like Charlotte Bronte and I could kick it.
It's awesome.
All right, so I have another question from another person we don't know. What do you feel like are your editing strengths? And on the flip side, what may be the element you can't help with as much? Which is actually a very good question, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I'll just say romance is tough for me. And I think that I can help you with it. It's just not my strongest editing quality. I like to think I give really good developmental edits, but what I've been told by mentees is that I have a really keen eye for like the line edits and the copy edits and making sure that the prose is really sharp and efficient. And I do enjoy kind of going through and coming through the manuscripts and making sure that's the case. There's nothing I love more than kind of clean, neat prose. So I would say that's my strength.
I'd say one of my strengths is probably helping with plotting and pacing, even though like when I write, that's a problem for my own self, but I can see it in other people's work. So I can do that. And I don't really help people with their voice, because I think you either have it or you don't. And I am drawn to, the voice. So if I love your manuscript for your voice, I won't want to mess with it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Kim and I'm going to just loop Kim in there because I work as a team. I think we're particularly good, and we have a desire to help with marrying a great plot arc with a great emotional arc and helping people figure out how to do that. We love structure, and we love bringing an emotional arc into the structure and help bringing the structure forward. We love the book Story Genius. If we want to give out craft recs, it's amazing. I think that woman's a genius. So there's that. I think I never know when to cut jokes. And I think I love an author with a good voice. And if they're like, I'm trying to slim this down, I'm like, oh, I can point scenes that aren't working, but let's save these 10 jokes because they're the greatest. And Kim has to control me. So that's my definition.
And that's the thing that's great about Pitch Wars, is that everybody has different strengths. Like, I'm not that good with funny. it's not that I don't appreciate funny. I really do. I'm just not very good at helping you make your manuscript more funny or integrating that really well into the plot. So send your funny books to, to Jennifer and Kim, funny magical books, and send me the things that are maybe a little bit more earnest, a little bit more serious. And I really like teaching the craft of writing. So I think one of my strengths is teaching you stuff that you're going to take not just on this manuscript, but to your next one as well.
And again, I want to just plug, definitely check out the wish list and, see, and they do put things in there, like their strengths and things that they like and they think they're good at. So definitely, again, check out the wish list. So next question, it's a bit broad, but I'm going to see if you guys have any tips. So this is from Fox531TD. Do you guys have any advice for helping an MG book be sold? I feel like if we did, everyone would sell all of them. It's such a tricky question. It's a good question, but it's a very tricky question. So you guys have any tips? Do you think anything's going on that you're noticing in the industry and trends and stuff?
Pick a good.
I mean, one thing I would say is just, do a lot of reading of recently published books, because you'll see those are the books that are getting sold and bought. Yeah. And, look at the ones that, kids are flocking to, like, middle grade people are flocking to graphic novels, illustrated novels, funny books, starting to like horror, so just take a look at what is actually being sold and see if, there are elements of those that, are in your own work.
Yeah, I had a follower today actually DM me and ask, do comps matter? And I'm just like, yes, heck yes, they matter. Know what's selling, know what people are buying as well. Look at some of the top selling MG books and find any that have similarities to yours, whether in theme or voice or plot. Yeah, that's sage advice, Sylvia.
I would also just add that comps definitely matter. And George, I agree with you 1,000%. I would say for pitch wars, don't worry if your comps are not perfect. If you get chosen as a mentee, one of the things your mentors are going to help you do is make your query beautiful. So I think stressing about comps in the next 3 weeks and trying to find the perfect ones, or 2 weeks, I don't even know time, but don't stress about comps.
10 days, I think.
What
I think
is
if I have the
time?
day right. So,
but don't stress about comps.
Work on. All right. So next question is from Catherine Faye. If I have a book, I don't know how to make it bigger. If I have a book that didn't get in last year, but has really changed in edit, do I re-enter it? And could I enter it to the same mentors? I'm trying to decide which manuscript I should enter.
I would say enter your strongest one. And if it's the one that you entered last year and you've made substantive changes to it, not just polishing up the first chapter, but you've really dug into it, then I have no problem with seeing something a second time.
Same.
I'll give it my own advice that no one asked for. If I gave you feedback last year and you want to resubmit to me, I would like to make sure that not that you had to incorporate my feedback, but you did make some kind of the big issues that I addressed, so I think that might be a factor too, if you're looking at same people and interactions you've had with them. So anyone else?
Yeah, I guess I would say if I had actually given you pretty substantial feedback on a manuscript, I might not want to see it again, only because, I don't know, I just feel like maybe I'd already given what I had to give, perhaps, so.
Anyone else? I just want to put this one up because this must have been when Sarah showed up. The look on her face. Like, surprise! Anyway,
when Sarah busts out with the really hard question.
So funny. Sorry. Okay, this is from Seto Kaiba. Have you noticed any uptick in books being bought up or a need for advice in the era of COVID? More to the point, books with writing influenced significantly by the current situation. That's interesting to hear about this from an MG perspective. You guys have any thoughts on this?
I'm almost tempted to answer it's too soon to tell, because books that were written during the year that everybody was at home, or the continued time that everybody was at home, I'm sure that it's going to be in the fiction, but we haven't. I mean, I've seen it in my CP's work, but they're not published yet. And those books are getting sold and printed, but publishing is slow. So like, check in 2023, basically, I think.
Hopefully we're not still in a pandemic.
I know, but I feel like that's the, like, I feel like there was a lot of like reactionary post 2016, great, like feminist burn the world down books that came out in like 2018 and 2019, because that is the speed at which publishing moves. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I wouldn't shy away from it, especially if you're writing a contemporary story. Writing a contemporary story and completely leaving the pandemic out feels kind of strange.
I think that's the struggle too. Yeah. For all of us, an adult too. Like, how do you handle the pandemic? So.
Yeah. And I'm not sure we're quite the right audience or the people to answer this, because it's the agents and editors who are now seeing those manuscripts. And so I don't know that. But like, I don't know. I have gotten the sense from the little I've sort of seen on Twitter that people tend to like want escapist, stories. So maybe not as much focus on the COVID, the actual pandemic.
Though I am seeing dystopian pick up again.
Yeah.
I sold my book last summer during the pandemic, and I sold it on proposal. So I had the option of trying to add the pandemic into it, and I ended up not doing it. So it's tricky. It's very, very tricky. Chad has some clarifications to their earlier question about death in the beginning of the thing. So it says, my apologies for not clarifying. My work in progress will be approximately 20,000 word chapter book for 9 to 12. And my death question would be hornets, villains versus a fly protagonist. But you folks nailed it anyway, so thank you. So I don't know if that changes your advice to Chad or not.
I'll only say that when I was, I think, 7 years old, the librarian in my school library read us a story about a spider, and it's like it was a picture book, and the spider ate a fly in the story, and that has permanently scarred me. So I can't even look at spiders. But but in all seriousness, Chad, I think it can work if it's. I imagine it's going to be approached very lightly because they're insects. Don't get too philosophical with it.
So this is from Alexandra Williams. Would you prefer appreciate being upfront with what prospective mentees need the most help with, as in during the pitch itself? I think that they mean that in the query letter, because with Pitch Wars, it's you send a query letter like you would send to an agent. I have thoughts on this, but I want to hear you guys' thoughts.
I think for me, I'd like to see the query letter that you would want to send to an agent. So presenting your work the best possible way. If and when I ask for more pages, I usually will have questions like, what do you think are the areas you want to work on?
Mm-hmm. Same.
Cosign.
Same. Even though I'm not mentoring anything. So 100%. Also, I think you don't want to I want to look at it from my own fresh eyes and not thinking like, oh, they think the plot's, or they think the dialogue's back. I want to just come in with fresh eyes and form my own opinions about it, and then like they said, ask and see what you think. If what you think aligns with what I think. That's why I always suggest that mentors ask that first to make sure that there's some alignment going on, because that needs to be important, because it is the mentee's story. So, all right. So Ebony has a question. How do you feel about books in verse for MG?
Send me the verse. I really, I would love to mentor a verse novel this year. That would make me really, really happy.
Send them to Julie.
Send them to Julie.
Yeah, I love reading them, but I don't think I'm qualified to mentor.
Yes, I think that's somewhere on our wish list. Kim and I love reading them, and graphic novels too, but we just want to be the best mentors possible, and we don't think we would be with either of those situations.
Same here.
Yeah, love reading them though.
Okay, I think I quick. So I'm gonna guess us back. What tips do you have for writing a one-page synopsis?
There's one article that gets linked, and it's always like the best one. So I think if I can find it, I'll tweet it or something. But I think it's Pub Crawl or something, and it uses Star Wars as example.
And there's one with Wonder Woman too that's really good. If I find it, I'll tweet it out. I feel a little bit personally responsible for there being a synopsis required for Pitch Wars, because I was one of the mentors that was like, please require a synopsis. And here's why, before you send me hate mail. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to be like super voicey or be like the jacket copy that's going to go on your book. We just want to see if the plot holds together before we read the entire manuscript, because our inboxes get flooded and we're busy. So if you can just literally break it down into the top 10 important things that happen and show us a little bit of the character arc and the plot arc, it does not have to be pretty. We just want to know how the story ends and where you're going. So try not to stress.
What year did you make? What year did we start doing synopsis?
I don't know. I think 2017 wasn't.
I was going to say,
Jennifer,
if it was 2018, it was my fault.
No, I needed in 2017 I needed to submit one, so I'm gonna blame Julie.
Dang it, Julie.
Yeah, I'm kidding. It might not really be my fault, but I was one that was rejoicing about the choice, which I know is not universally loved in the community.
Kim and I don't read them. I think some mentors choose not to read them. I think we don't read them because we love the pages, we love the query, and I think we want to be surprised as the book comes out. But some mentors very much do read them, so I think don't stress.
Okay, cool. Anyone else?
Similar to Jennifer, I don't always read them, but when
everyone reads them.
I don't always read them. I do when I'm narrowing it down, though, is what I'll say. The pages are the first thing I go to. I want to see your voice. I want to see how you write. But the synopsis, when I'm narrowing it down, really does matter. And I'll say that Jennifer brought up Story Genius earlier, and just quick notes, there's an internal motivation and external motivation for every character. Make sure you capture that internal motivation in the synopsis. Show why characters are doing the things they do, not just that they do it. That's probably my only advice there.
Well, Kelly, I just actually added the link to the chat, so I don't know if any of you all can use your magic to put it up somewhere else on the YouTube.
Okay, I'm gonna try to do this, and if I lose the conversation, it's all your fault, Sylvia. Sarah's gonna come.
Google publishing crawl synopsis, you'll find it.
All right, yeah, I'm putting it in the YouTube chat under Sarah, so this will be another Sarah. This is me. All right. Okay, so now I gotta find out where I was. Oh lordy. Oh lordy. Okay, hold on. Okay, here we go. This is where we stopped off. So another question from MJ. In the scope of world building elements for MG, do you recommend keeping the world relatively small where the MC is occurring, or fleshing out ideas for the larger world?
Well, it depends on a couple things. Do you want your book to be a series and include details that could hint to things later in the series? Start with character, in my opinion. Always, if it's not necessary to the character or the character's storyline, it shouldn't be there. But if it is, and if it adds some richness to the world, because again, we're seeing everything through their point of view, then kind of immerse us at it. Feel free to. Obviously don't write 100,000 word MG though.
Yes. I think that's a really smart answer. I think it's cool to know a lot of this stuff, and it's cool while you're brainstorming to flesh out the world and make it beautiful and rich and multifaceted. But at the same time, if a lot of the work you're going to be doing is going to be off page, because we're not going to need to know deep details about the way the government works, or the way farming works, or the way transportation works. It's great for you to know it. And then when the character encounters those things and they're like paying for something, they should use the money in the world, and you should think about how their family got that money. But you don't need to go into deep detail on the page unless it furthers the story, but it's cool to know it. And so I think yes to both.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I
I'll
agree.
say that
It's
I'm-
like
Yeah.
you definitely want to expand enough to make the story make sense. And like if, for example, you're doing a high fantasy or sci-fi where part of the overall conflict is, between oppressive government and the rebels, well, you want to know enough of that world to be able to, know what are the social political issues or the religious, whatever's like driving that conflict, but you don't need to like explain it all. It just needs to come out when it's relevant.
Yeah, I'll say
Yeah,
that Mari and the Night
absolutely.
Brothers does as well.
Anyone else? I'm going to go to the next question. It's for Sylvia and George. It's about MG graphic novels. Can you please explain what makes you like a graphic novel?
So for me, I'll just say it's not necessarily the illustrations, though those need to be really strong and promising for an agent. But really, it's the story, right? Because if you're an author illustrator, it's oftentimes, I have a lot of friends who write graphic novels, and the author part of that equation is more difficult than the illustration. And so being able to tell a compelling story from beginning to finish is really important. And so if you demonstrate kind of that you have that aptitude, or if you have promise there, I'm happy to work with you. That's probably the biggest thing for me, is just making sure you can tell a story, and whether the illustrations are fantastic or not, it's not. That's an afterthought for me.
Well, Sylvia?
I think for me, it's more of a balance, because I'm definitely drawn to the illustrations. And so, and I don't, even though I have an art background, I don't, for this purpose, Pitch Wars, I'm not mentoring for the art, I'm mentoring for the story. And so I agree that I do want to see a level of, like an entertaining story, the same elements that would draw me into a manuscript. So just that you're able to tell a story, but I mentored a graphic novel in author mentor match, and I just love the premise, and I love the lots of like the scenes, and I worked with my mentee a lot on the overall, like as Jennifer said, marrying the character emotional arc to the plot arc. So that's the kind of thing I'm happy to work with, but I want to have like the elements that I love there.
So Susan has a great question. What questions might you ask the writers on your short list? We give you guys suggestions. I'm trying to remember like what they are.
Yeah, I mean, we get really good suggestions from you all. I think one of them is along the lines of kind of like, how open are you to making major revisions? And for me, that's the most important thing, because I've had manuscripts that are really promising, but the individuals have expressed that, they don't want to change certain things too much. And I think what LQ and I look for is just being super open-minded, and being like, where most things are malleable. Obviously, it's a very personal item, that's fine. But generally speaking, like as long as you're flexible, that's really critical for us in those final stages.
Anyone else? Because I can definitely drop some suggestions. Questions.
I definitely, if I'm going to suggest something like drastically changing the scope of the story, like either starting a lot earlier or starting a lot later, dropping a point of view. If there's multiple, we had one year, we had 5 points of view, and we had them cut down to one. And we understand that's a huge change. We would never ask you to make that change if you weren't okay with it and if it didn't resonate. So we just want to check with that up front. Like maybe even changing the point of view character, adding a second point of view if you've only got one point of view. Any major change like that, I'm going to run it by my potential mentees to make sure that they're okay with it.
I think one of the questions I also asked was sort of a little bit about you as in your own writing journey, like what stage are you at? And also the manuscript that you're submitting, like how much has it been queried or has it never been queried? Just to get an idea of like where you are in your career and with this manuscript.
Yeah, Kim and I ask all of those. I think we also ask some questions about like what you think you want to work on in your writing and in the manuscript itself. But I think we ask all of those.
One thing I used to always ask is, what What's one thing you don't want to change?
We asked that too, actually. Thank you for reminding me.
And my advice to you guys who are applying is, I think sometimes people want to like give the answers they think the mentors want, but we want you to be honest, because you're gonna be spending 3 months with this person, and you guys want it to be a good relationship, and so you guys should be on the same page from the beginning. And if you're not, it's going to be a painful process all around for everybody, because you're going to be bumping heads, and that's not really what you want, and so it's better for you to not be with the mentor if you guys are on the same page. So yeah. All right, we're almost done, you guys. So let's see. Someone has asked me a question in there. All right, here's a question from Anne. My book is the first of a planned series, so my MC doesn't complete his entire arc by the end of the book, since he will grow more in later books. How much of the arc should be in book 1? That's actually a good question.
They need to have an arc in book 1. It may not be the arc that they're going to complete over the course of the whole series, but there's really no guarantees in this business that a second book is going to get published or a third book. I have friends and colleagues who have had a planned trilogy and only gotten to publish one, or have had a trilogy that they've completed and then get to add a 4th book. So on the other hand, you always have to be able to come up with an arc. So when they say standalone, they literally mean if book 2 never comes out, you don't want your readers to all be like, I wonder what happened, because it ended on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
That happened in my second book of my mystery series. I ended on a cliffhanger, and then book 3 never happened. So that was fun.
Yeah. I think, I know it's not middle grade, but I think The Hunger Games is a great example. I think it's just brilliantly plotted, but also I think everybody's safe for now, plot-wise. And I think especially in middle grade, where series tend to end, that first book, everybody's safe for now. And then emotional arc, everybody's learned something. They might not have learned their whole thing, but they've learned something. So I think that's a really good example of like usually where we're going.
And quite often, if you imagine it as like a lens, the lens opens a little bit more for book 2. So maybe you've got a little bit of a narrow focus, and you've just seeded a few things that are going to happen in the later series. But for this narrow view through the lens, you've completed the arc, and then you'll step back, and then the world will be bigger, and there'll be a second arc to tackle in the next book.
Anyone else? So I think we're going to end it with our last question that Sarah always asks, and you guys hopefully will all answer. What is the single best query tip you have or been told? And then the other thing is, can you let everyone know where to find you guys, especially if they have questions for you about your wish list? I'm going to go first, Jennifer.
Sure.
I warned you. I knew where this question was happening.
You did warn me. Okay. So where to find me? That's super easy. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram at ITS Jenny L. Brown. And Kim is, I'm pretty sure she is Kim Long MG, but hold on. I think that's right. We DM constantly. I should know this. Let me just look it up for a second. In terms of like a query tip, I think I'm going to go, yes, that's right. Good job, Jen. I think in terms of a query tip, my advice is going to be actually give it to people who have not read the book and ask them the question, is anything confusing? I think particularly we deal in a lot of fantasy and speculative stuff of sci-fi. Sometimes queries are like a little more unintelligible than you'd want them to be. So I think handing that to somebody, they don't even have to be a writer, just handing it to a couple of people who've never read your story, who haven't had deep conversations with you about the world, and going, what do you find confusing? Because I think that would be really helpful.
Next, Sylvia.
I guess my tip isn't so much on the writing side, but more on the process of, when you're submitting to agents. I actually wrote a pretty long post that I recently tweeted about, but I can retweet it. But one of the things I highly recommend, it's a little wonky, is actually pay for the $25 Query Tracker Pro. Because once you do that, you get a lot of reports on like basically how quickly agents respond to specific queries. And what it is people self-report their own queries, and like if the agent rejected them or asked for more or whatever. And so you will actually see your query in order that it was received. And so you might be query number 120, and you can literally follow that agent and see, like, as they move down the line, are they really quick responders? Do they spend a year, and never get back to people? And so you get a really good sense of, like, just strategically who you might want to query or whether you're being considered. It's just a little bit more information. So
I loved Query Tracker when I was querying. So I loved it. Yeah, I think I could pay for it. What about you, George? Oh, wait, Sylvia, where can we find you?
Oh, yeah. Twitter, I'm at ArtsyLou, ArtsyLliu. And my wish list is on my blog, which is sylvialouland.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Really good advice. I'm just trying to think of what I would add to it. I mean, there's very basic advice, but one thing that I did see a lot last year in Pitch Wars, and that I've seen in the other mentoring competitions that I've worked with, is make sure your bio is not longer than the actual pitch itself. That is just not a good look, and I see it very often, and I know that agents see it very often. And just be succinct about yourself, unless you have a ton of accolades, which I sure didn't. Be succinct with your bio. Be humble there, and make sure you focus on, the heart of your story being portrayed in that query. Where to find me? At by George Jreije on Twitter, Instagram, and my very new TikTok.
He's on TikTok. Do you do what do you do on TikTok? Do you do like little skits and stuff?
No, I'm not that creative. I mostly plug friends' books.
Oh.
And like I'll go to like Barnes and Noble and be like, this is what my book's gonna be one day.
Aspirational.
Yeah, more aspirational than anything. But yeah, that's just find me. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me, say hello, whatever. Always happy to chat with folks.
Awesome. And then Julie.
So my number one piece of query advice, after you do everything that everybody else already said, is to read a bunch of queries. There's a couple of blogs out there that have successful queries or have post-query revisions. Query Shark, Quite the Query is a good one. And because if you're sitting there and your friend has already told you your query is confusing, I don't get it, and you're like, how am I going to get all this world building of a 60,000 word book into 250 words? Because it should be 250 words. It really should, I promise. Then you can look at examples of how other people have done it. And you can say, oh yeah, I don't need to tell the entire history of the land. I just need to hook the reader and sort of give them a flavor of what the world is like, and then go into my very succinct bio, and then get to the pages, which is where we're going to see the voice anyway.
Yeah, I think for me, like your query should be like kind of like book flap copy, and so it shouldn't give the whole. It should just make you want to read the pages. And actually, with my first book, the actual book flap copy is basically my query, and it happens a lot. I think a lot of times they'll use that same information. So so it should get you. It should just be a taste to get you excited for wanting to read those pages. Like, oh, this sounds so good.
I would add one more thing, which is, like, especially for fantasy, stay away from all the proper nouns. You can name your main character, but you don't have to name the side characters, the name of the kingdom. Instead, you can say the evil sorcerer or the side, so just makes it easier.
And then finally, Julie, where can we find you?
Oh yeah, I'm Julie Artz everywhere. So on Twitter, Julie Artz, Instagram, and my website where you'll find my wish list is julieartz.com.
That was a tip that someone I heard one time from someone famous. So, like, make sure all of your social handles are the same thing. So you should be the same name on each one. It's easier. So
Very true. Give Kelly and Sarah all the love too if you're watching
me.
for organizing all this.
Sarah's probably gone at
Yes.
this point.
Oh, okay. Give Kelly. Ignore
you.
Sarah. Give Kelly all the love.
Yes.
I did all myself. Okay? Nothing. I did nothing. They didn't help me at all. So thank you guys so much. It was a great first hour. We have our next 3 mentors waiting in the wings. So I'm gonna try to remove you guys. So bye, Jennifer. Bye, Sylvia. Bye, Julie. Bye, George. It's just me now. Okay, so now I'm going to add the next 3. Hold on. Here we go. You ready? Here is AJ. And Karah. Am I saying your name right?
It's Karah.
Karah.
Yep.
Tracy.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm just going to do a quick refresher. This is the MG Mentor Chat. We are talking to our amazing MG middle grade mentors. They're going to give you advice on anything you want. So definitely if you're on YouTube, ask questions in the chat. I'll see them. I'll put them on the screen. If you're on Twitter, you can ask questions there, but it's better just to come to YouTube and ask the questions there. All right. Are you guys ready? Let's start off by having everyone tell us about yourselves. So AJ, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I apologize in advance if I'm a little loopy because I'm on like hour 20 of my Yom Kippur fast. But anyway, I totally got the dates mixed up. But hi, everyone. I am AJ Sass. I am a middle grade contemporary author currently. Hope to branch out in the future. But I'm coming to you guys from the West Coast right now. I'm in the Bay Area, California. And I am the author of the middle grade contemporary novel Anna on the Edge, which came out last year, I believe. Time has no meaning anymore, but yeah, it was last October. And I have also written a book called Ellen Outside the Lines that is coming out next March. And here's the cover for the art on that one. Oh, wrong way. I have been a mentor for a couple of years now. I was a mentee myself in a different program back in 2018 and applied to Pitch Wars, which is where I met my co-mentor, Nicole Melleby, who was solo mentoring that year. And we kept chatting after Pitch Wars. Actually signed with an agent before they announced mentees. So I wasn't part of that year, but I met a lot of great people just through the submission process who are also trying to apply. Got some great CPs out of it. And of course, met Nicole. And came back in 2019 to 2020 to be a co-mentor with Nicole. And our mentee, Lynn Thompson, that year actually secured an agent and went to auction on her book, or on their book, which is coming out, I think 2 weeks before mine. It's called The Best Liars in Riverview. And I figured I'd plug that since I have an arc here. And if the arc looks a little similar to Ellen Outside the Lines, it's because we are like published by the same publisher and some kind of strange kismet. So yeah. I love Pitch Wars, and I'm really excited to be mentoring again a year.
I'm happy that you're back. Do you want to give us some hints on what's on your wish list, you and Nicole?
Oh goodness, yeah, we're primarily looking for middle grade contemporary or something that's grounded in a real life environment. We would love to see work from diverse authors, queer stories. I'm autistic, so I would love to see disabled stories that are centering autism or any other type of disability or neurodiversity, stories that involve characters of faith. And we're really excited because we're interested in graphic novels this year. And both of us have more experience with verse novels, which was on our do not want list last year. But now we would desperately love to see some submissions for verse novels because we really love them. So, yeah.
All right. Tracy, you want to introduce yourself and give us some hints about your wish list?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound good.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Badua. My debut contemporary fantasy middle grade Freddy versus the Family Curse comes out next year. I am here in San Diego, California, so another West Coaster. I did have a pumpkin spice cold brew earlier just to kind of get that fall feeling, even though I'm in warm Southern California. A little bit more about what I'm looking for is, I love contemporary. Like I said, my debut is contemporary fantasy. So anything light or funny is definitely something that I'd want to see. Science fiction, fantasy, mystery,
adventure and retellings. I'm open to a lot of stuff. You can go ahead and check out my wish list on my website. And I think I already said this, but humor. So if anything funny, I'd love to read. I know I've been centering my reading on joyful reading lately. So anything that's going to put a smile on my face when I open your query package is just, I'll love it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. Hi, Karah.
Hello. So I'm Karah Sutton. I am co-mentoring this year with Gracie Kim, who unfortunately couldn't join us today. We were mentors back in 2019, and so we actually both skipped 2020 because we were both like knee deep in our debut year. So we both had our debuts come out at the end of last year. So mine is A Wolf for a Spell. This was a gift from my friends. They gave me a tapestry.
That's really cool. Oh, wow. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, and Gracie, so that's from Knopf Books for Young Readers, which is Random House Children's. And Gracie's debut was The Last Fallen Star, which is the first in the Gifted Clans trilogy, which is from Rick Riordan Presents, which is Disney Hyperion. Yeah, so I was also a mentee in 2017. So I definitely know what it feels like to have been both on the mentee side and the mentor side now, as I've now done both. And the other thing kind of worth noting is that both Gracie and I are based in New Zealand. So that was actually how we met, because I'm from Kentucky originally, but I came to New Zealand in 2011 now, so it's been 10 years, and I am now a dual New Zealand citizen. So I consider myself an American New Zealand author, and Gracie is born in Korea, raised in New Zealand. So we both love kind of like stories that will take us to another world. We love retellings. We basically both love anything with magic. I mean, both of our debuts are fantasy, so magic is big for us, but definitely not a requirement. We both love reading contemporary novels as well, historic, a lot of other genres. We both wrote witchy books, so witches are always something that gets a second look for us. Same with like mythology, folklore, fairy tales, any kind of retellings like that, especially from previously underrepresented cultures and viewpoints. We both also have our own disabilities, and so we'd be especially excited to see disabled characters who get to go on exciting adventures. We both really love rich, lush settings, stories with emotional resonance, so we're very into character-driven stories and stories that feel like a puzzle that we really would love to solve. That's something that I always find really delicious. So yeah, that's what we're especially excited about this year.
So I said this first hour, but definitely check everyone's wish list out. You know, we do have the spreadsheet this year where you can kind of go by a genre, but still read the wish list. You know,
Yeah,
you kind of get more details about what they're looking for and their styles and things like that. So let's jump into some questions. First is from Alexandra. First person present, third person past. Do you have preferences? Are there hard rules you live by? And also, just so you guys know, just jump in and don't feel like you have to answer every question.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. Definitely no hard rules for me. I think Gracie wrote in first person, I wrote in third person. We're comfortable mentoring, giving feedback on both. The only one that I have personally run into challenges with is third person present. That was actually what my manuscript was originally, and I did get a bunch of pushback from agents on that. It was a little, it kind of saddened me because I actually love that tense and I would love to see it work. So it's not going to be a deal breaker by any means, but it does seem to be one of those things that at an industry level, there's a little bit of hangups around. But yeah, definitely no hard and fast rules there from what we're willing to look at and consider.
Yeah, I was sort of giggling a little bit quietly to myself when you said third person present, because I actually kind of got away with doing that for a short story. But I did get kind of some electronic side eyes from the editors on that. But yeah, I got to keep my third person present tense for a short story that's coming out next month, and an anthology, a middle grade anthology. But the story was actually the kind of the origin story of a co-written project that Nicole and I are doing called Camp Colpeg, which is not written in third person present tense. It's in third person past tense, which I think is, as Karah said, a little bit more industry acceptable. That said, I don't think any kind of issue with tense or choice of tense would really deter me or Nicole from working with a mentee with a story that we really loved. Nicole traditionally writes in third person past tense. I used to write fanfic in third person past tense, but all of my solo novels are in first person present tense. And my work in progress right now is first person past tense with a little bit of present tense sprinkled in. So I love all the tenses. It's really what works best for your story. And if we really love the story and we feel like the narrative tense isn't working, that's something that we can have a discussion about too, and maybe decide if it needs to be changed. So yeah.
I'll echo that. I also love all of the tenses. There are no hard rules. I personally write in first person present, but I think for me, it's more of, if the tense isn't distracting me from your story, if it's not removing me too much from what's going on and what your character is feeling, that's kind of what I'll be looking for.
Nice. So next question is from DT. Other than romance, what other subplot tropes do you guys stand?
That's a found families. I know that's something that Gracie and I both are like super keen on. I think both of our debut novels address found families. I definitely, for me, it's not so much plot tropes as like character tropes. I love a lovable rogue, or like characters who get into a bit of mischief but are still ultimately good at heart. Yeah, I feel like, and I mentioned witches as well, so kind of witchy characters, people who possibly untrustworthy, that sort of thing.
I love, I'm sorry. I love stories with like the big families, or the kind of big multi-generational families where, like, you know, you may have randomly like a cousin or an uncle play like a big part in it. It's just something that's kind of true to my experience. I was like, oh, you know, grandma shows up. Cool. So I like those I like seeing those in stories.
Anything else?
Yeah, I love found families too. And I specifically also like stories where you're introduced to a character that the main character doesn't necessarily like at first, and they end up being friends at some point, because it's just, you know, maybe first impressions aren't always accurate, and you get to know the character better. And I just love seeing that evolution of character from like an initial dislike or even hatred almost to, hey, this person's actually really cool. So I love seeing that.
Nice. All right, next question is from Karen. I have an MG that is just over 20,000 words. Is this too short for middle grade? Should I try to sell it as a chapter book instead?
So I'll personally say I'm not too well versed in the chapter book space. I've really focused on middle grade, but last year I did mentor in author mentor match, and I'd like to say that a lot of the shorter kind of stories that I saw that were within maybe that 20,000 or less range, they needed a little bit more fleshing out. So whether it was character or like maybe the plot went a little too quickly. So it could be, it was something I would need to see in terms of knowing whether, you know, maybe 20,000 is exactly what you need to tell your story and it's perfect the way it is. But in some cases, you know, there might be opportunities to beef it up or like kind of add some extra fun to it. So 20,000 is a little bit sparse, but that doesn't mean it's not out of range for middle grade.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say I'm somebody who writes really short and then has to pad as I revise, not pad, but add as I revise. Like most of my first drafts tend to be around 20,000 words, and then they get beefed up. So I think my debut ended up at around 53,000 words, and then my whip is around 50 something thousand words as well, and both of those started at about half that length. A few things I would think about. One is chapter books have a very different voice, so you shouldn't, well, I can't say definitively you shouldn't, but like I would be cautious around calling it a chapter book just because of the length if the voice isn't a chapter book style voice as well. If your voice really leans more middle grade, then I would think of it as a middle grade book and figure out whether that length is right or not. Yeah, because middle grade is going to have a different level of detail and kind of different voice as well. The other thing is that there's variations depending on genre as well. Contemporary seems to be a lot more common to have novels around 20,000 words and 20 to 30,000. Like I see that a lot more often than you see in fantasy, where there's different world building expectations. So yeah, I think the short answer is that it depends. We wouldn't discount reviewing a novel at 20,000 words, especially if the voice really draws us in. But we would probably be assessing whether that word count is it demonstrates that it needs anything else, or where exactly it might fit.
Cool. Anyone else? The next question then. From MJ. I'm a fantasy writer, but I love the idea of exploring supernatural elements in contemporary novels, i.e. werewolf hunters, with male/female friends. Does that fall into contemporary IYO? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
I think that's in your opinion.
Oh, I'm not
Possibly.
cool, y'all. I'm so not
I'm
cool.
just guessing.
I don't know.
I would maybe call that speculative or like grounding contemporary, maybe. I think for the purposes of a query letter, you don't need to overthink it too much, especially for a mentorship program. The mentors can work with you to kind of assess what the most appropriate genre would be when you're querying agents. But no, there have been some recent book deals that I've seen too that are, about vampire middle grade kids in a real life setting, or even werewolves. I'm thinking of someone who just sold a Jewish werewolves book. So they do exist. I'm not exactly sure what they're called, and maybe one of the other mentors knows, but I guess that to me would be more of a grounded contemporary, or like a contemporary with light speculative elements or something. So yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I personally would probably call that contemporary fantasy myself. I think because anything, once you have magic, to me, it puts it in fantasy, and then it's just what subgenre of fantasy is it. Gracie's book, The Last Fallen Star, is contemporary, set in Los Angeles, but then has these magic families and its own sort of lore that's associated with it. So it's the magic kind of makes it fantasy, but then it is in a contemporary setting.
Anyone else? No. Right. So our favorite Sarah. Who are some of your favorite MG book characters? Sarah always has the stumpers.
I gotta say, one of the characters that I really liked in a recent read was Efren, and Efren Divided by Ernesto Cisneros. He's just such like a good kid, and he's a good brother, and he cares about everybody. So I really liked him.
Anyone else have any favorites from all time?
I'm kind of struggling, to be honest. This is funny. I feel like it's like trying to name my favorite child or something. Yeah, I think a book that I read recently that I absolutely adored was Eva Evergreen's Semi-Magical Witch, and Eva in that is just delightful. It's such a warm hug of a book, and she's somebody who's just so kind, but also has her little flaws, and yeah, and she's like tenacious, and yeah, so she's a recent favorite for me.
Nice. Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I have to do recent favorites too, or else I'll have to be like trying to pull up from the recesses of my memory, like every single middle grade book I've read as a kid. But one of the first books that I read after the pandemic hit that really got me out of my reading slump and introduced me to verse novels for the first time was Emmy and the Key of Code by Amy Lucido. And that book was just so wonderful. And the main character just popped out of the page for me. If you haven't read it, it's about a girl whose parents are musicians, and she wants to be a musician too because she loves music, but she's not really any good at any kind of musical talent. So she takes a coding class at school, and as she gets more and more passionate about computer programming, she starts relating coding to music and musical theory and stuff like that. And as someone who grew up with very musical parents who used to teach piano lessons and stuff, I just really connected with that character. And I also really liked Albie from The Last Rabbit by Shelley Moore Thomas. It's a more recent book too. It's a historical fantasy that's set on an island. And there are 4 girls who have been turned into rabbits. And it's kind of a mystery as to why they're rabbits. And 3 of them left. So the final rabbit, Albie, has to go in search of them. And it's got the most beautiful illustrations in it too. It's like very sparse illustrations, but it's not just at the top of the chapters. So it was just a really unique book that I really enjoyed reading, and that character has kind of stayed with me since it came out.
Nice. So you guys, if you have questions, now's the time to ask them. So next one is from Jennifer Wren. Can y'all talk a bit about the process of getting a middle grade novel illustrated?
I would love to talk about this because it's something I'm super excited about, because my day job is that I work in a video game studio, and so
How cool is that?
yes, it's yes, I love my job, and so I'm used to working with artists all the time, and so when I went into publishing, I had very strong opinions about like what illustrations I wanted, and it was something I was very nervous about also. So couple things. One is that publishers consider your illustrator as part of how they package and market the book. So generally, not always, but generally they like to choose the illustrator unless you are an author illustrator yourself. It was something that when I was first starting writing, I had a lot of people going, oh, you could hire an illustrator and that'll give you an edge. And that's not really how it works. Publishers like to be able to consider how the illustrations affect the overall package that they are creating for the book. So yeah, so unless you're an author illustrator yourself, generally advisable not to like go out and try to find an illustrator yourself. And then I can speak to how finding an illustrator worked for my book, because A Wolf for a Spell is very heavily illustrated. It has more than 50 like kind of full page illustrations. And so what we did was, because I was very excited about illustration and very kind of opinionated on it, when the book sold, my agent encouraged me to send a list of my favorite illustrators to my editor. And I did that. And I think what that ended up doing was it gave my publisher a sense of my taste and what kinds of illustrations I got most excited by. And then they sent me the illustrators that they were thinking about. And Paulina was one of them. They sent me her Instagram, and I just fell in love with her immediately. I was like, immediately follow all her social media. And so she was always my number one choice, and I was very clear about that. However, ultimately it is the publisher's choice. Like, I could say, I really, really want her. Please, can we try to get her? But in the end, the publisher is the one who makes that decision. And that's just kind of one of the things that happens when you're going traditionally published, is it means that there are certain things that you are that become the publisher's domain rather than you, the author. And that's something to think about when you're an author, is, if you want complete creative control over how the cover looks, what the illustrations are, then that's generally more the domain of self-publishing than being traditionally published. But like the way it worked for me all worked out really, really well, because they approached Paulina. She was very interested and excited, and so we ended up working with her. So they actually handled all of that side of things. And then in terms of like how hiring her and getting her to draw up the illustrations, but they kept me very much informed. So they asked for, like, can I create a list of scenes that I want illustrated, moments that I think should have an illustration? I could give feedback on the illustrations, like, oh, Baba Yaga doesn't hold a long staff, she holds a cane, things like that. So corrections or any concerns about how the illustration matched the text. So lots of communication, but ultimately owned by the publisher.
That's kind of really cool. It seems similar to like an audiobook when it comes to selecting an illustrator. You can suggest to your publisher an audiobook narrator that you like, but ultimately it's their choice. Anyone else have any input on this? That was great, Karah. Thank you. No. Let's go to the next question from Sarah. What will your process be like going through your pitch war submission inbox, and how will you decide who to choose? I think, Tracy, are you a first-time mentor?
I am, yes.
Okay, but we have a couple of vets and a first time, so I'm curious to see what the vets are going to say versus Tracy. So
I'll lay out my approach, and then I will take tips and tricks from the rest of you in case you're like, Tracy, this is a terrible idea, don't do it. But I'm the kind of person that reads everything. Like, I know how hard it is to kind of put these packages together. So, I want to make sure that I'm getting everyone their fair shot. I think one thing I will be looking for is, if it's something that I can help you improve, if it's something that I have a strength in that I'll be able to provide you some real guidance on. I was so lucky on the author mentor match side to get these submissions that I was like, they don't even need me. They're a better writer than I am. So I will, maybe I will get these amazing submissions this time too, and I'll have nothing more to teach you. So I will be looking for, I think it was mentioned in the hour previous, but it doesn't, your book doesn't have to be perfect. Like, you're applying for a mentorship because you want to grow and you want to learn. And I'm going to be looking for submissions where I can help the people do that.
Awesome. What about you guys?
Yeah, same here. Nicole and I, the last time we co-mentored, we're pretty avid texters with each other. So if we saw something that caught our eye, and we did read them all, we would text each other and be like, have you gotten to this one yet? And then we kind of flag it for each other. But we do go through them all, and we just make sure that, because we don't want to miss anything. And especially if you're a first time sort of novelist like I was when I was applying for Pitch Wars, you might not be as familiar with querying as someone who's queried a couple times with different manuscripts before. So that's why we read everything, because sometimes people just aren't as familiar with the query format and structure. So even if the query sort of throws us off a little bit and doesn't look like what we think a query should look like, that isn't going to deter us from continuing to read on, because the pages are what ultimately we want to fall in love with, and we can work on the query together. So yeah, we go through everything, and then we've mentored for a couple things and helped a couple people before within Pitch Wars and other programs, and we've been pretty on par with each other in sync in terms of what we really wanted to go for and work with. So we haven't had to worry about a fight over a specific manuscript or not. But if the person has marked down that they're open to other mentors outside of the 4 that they chose looking at it, and we think there might be a mentor who's a good fit for it, we also kind of bring that up with the other mentors just to make sure that nothing is getting left out. So yeah, that's where we go with ours.
Nice.
Yeah, I can speak to how this went for Gracie and myself in 2019 because I feel like it was actually a little bit of a lesson learned for us. Because what we initially did was we had a big spreadsheet and kind of ways of organizing our thoughts and keeping notes and things. And we initially just went through the queries and kind of started taking closer looks at books where the premise particularly intrigued us, or the kinds of information that you find out from a query. But we actually then we went back through and did a complete reread of all of the page submissions as well, and actually discovered one that we had kind of overlooked when we were just looking at the queries. And I can't remember why we overlooked her query, because it was not a bad query by any means, but it was just for whatever reason we didn't take as close a look at it. And so for us, Carol, the mentee who we chose, we just fell in love with her pages and with the voice and the character. And because that is something that is a lot harder for us to develop in the time that Pitch Wars allows. Voice is something that tends to come with practice and revision. And so it's a lot harder for us to kind of coach into a more developed voice than it is for us to say, yeah, okay, let's fix these plot concerns. Let's fix these character arcs. Let's fix this or that. So really for us, the voice and the page ended up actually being the key thing. So yeah, I would say that's definitely probably a learning that we'll take from last time and into this time, is to really focus on the page, because yeah, as AJ said, the query is something that not everyone knows how to do, and that's something that we hope we can help you with as mentors, is guide you through that, how to write that in that process.
Yeah. Some advice I have is, I think there's a 3-day window. Don't rush to submit your book early. Definitely don't wait to the last minute. Do not wait to the last hour. Don't rush, because all the mentors will read every submission, and they might not read it the first day, but they're going to read every one, And the other thing is, someone asked us earlier, your manuscript should be complete, because I know mentors who will, as soon as they love something, they will request it right away, and some of them mentors will go through their entire inbox before they request. Do you guys have anything? Do you guys prefer, have you found that you guys request right away, or are you guys maybe ones that more wait?
I can't remember. I think we requested as we went,
Yeah.
just as a way to try to avoid having full manuscripts pile up and having to read through them all. But it's probably one of those things that will be dependent on the submissions that we get. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, that's the same thing for us. I think last year we requested immediately, but we were also quite careful not to over request, because I have done that in past mentorship programs where I requested a certain number of manuscripts without any hope of being able to read the amount, with the amount of time being given, the full manuscript. So yeah, for us, I think it would just be making sure that the fulls that we request are ones that we are truly interested in reading all the way through. So however long it takes to get to that point where we know the number that is manageable for us would be, I think, when we request. But yeah, like Kelly said, don't worry about submitting like the first minute. Submission windows open. I'm not even sure mentors are supposed to be looking at.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
They're not allowed.
So-
Yeah, we don't know. We're mean. We don't allow you to look at them. So
don't even stress during the window. We aren't supposed to be looking during the window. I think to avoid the site crashing or something. So, yeah, just take a breath and just submit when you're ready.
What about Tracy? Do you have a plan of action?
Same. I'm going to be. I'm probably going to go through as much as I can first before requesting, just for what AJ said of not getting overwhelmed and just making sure that the fulls that I do request are ones that I can really dedicate some time to.
Yeah. One just final thought is that I definitely, even if we do request early, we definitely kept requesting right up until the end also. So it's like, I know that this is something that like I as a mentee got really anxious about. It was like, oh, I haven't gotten any requests within the first day. This means that nobody wants it. And it's like, there's all over the place how people request and when. Everyone's it's different. Like, yeah, absolutely.
I know.
Coming off of that, I mean, if you don't get requests at the same exact time that other people do, don't stress out. Like Karah said, it kind of comes through the day. Like maybe somebody reads at night when the kid go to sleep. Somebody reads at another time. So, don't
but also, I know at least 2 mentors who were adult crime fiction mentors who found their mentees literally like the last week before they were picked. So. I know it's hard because we try not to, say like don't brag on the hashtag. People do, they get excited, they understand they should be excited, but don't feel like because like I said, you haven't gotten a request right away, it does not mean that you won't get one. So I had another question for myself. Since we have 2 teams here, half the teams, do you guys have a plan yet of how you're gonna like divide the work up?
We tend to, like I said, text a lot. I don't know if we have an aversion to like being on video or a Zoom or something, but we just will send these novel length texts back and forth. But we work with a shared document and kind of build our edit letter around that. Like I don't know how many people are familiar with Nicole Melleby, but she's a very fast writer and a very fast reader. So the chances are she usually gets through things faster than me. So she'll start working on it and then I'll build on it. And if there's any point within the edit letter on developmental edits where one of us missed something and the other person noted it, we'll have a conversation about that. Or if we just don't agree with what to point out, we talk about it and strategize. So that's generally what we do. And once we have the edit letter done, we make sure that our mentee knows that they can ask questions of us or even hop on the phone. I believe we did with Lynn, a phone conversation so that Lynn could ask all of their questions and get clarification on anything in the edit letter. And then we just make ourselves available throughout the mentorship period. So if there are any things that come up or if our mentee gets overwhelmed, because edit letters are very overwhelming at times, we'll be there to encourage them and just let them know this feeling is very normal to feel like, I tend, when I get an edit letter, I tend to go through like the 7 stages of grief, basically, like denial and anger. And oh my gosh, I wrote something completely garbage. Why did my editor buy it? And I think that's, it's just normal. It's a lot often to have to dig apart a manuscript that you feel is polished because you've already probably revised it several times and to realize it's not done yet, because writing is rewriting. Basically, until it gets published, there will be changes. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, Karah, any quick thoughts on how you guys are going to work together, you and Gracie?
Yeah, I mean, we used a Google Doc as well. So we didn't like divide the work or anything like that. It wasn't like you do the first read, I'll do the second or anything like that. We pretty much would just both read through the same way, both keep our notes and then compare. And then if there were any areas where we didn't align, we'd kind of discuss that first. It's one of the advantages of Gracie and myself both being based in New Zealand. We were actually able to meet up and discuss in person, which was quite fun last time. Maybe not as much of an option this year, but we'll see how we go. But at the very least, we'll be having phone calls to discuss. We'll just make sure sure that we're completely aligned on the feedback that we want to give before giving any sort of edit letter. And that continued as we communicated with our mentee throughout. We would always sign our emails, Karah and Gracie, or Gracie and Karah, because it was like everything that we sent to the mentee was stuff that we had discussed beforehand to make sure that we were just aligned.
Cool, thank you. So next is, I think, a question from Twitter. Young adult is a rapidly evolving category. Is middle grade also changing fast, and are we entering a middle grade golden age?
I mean, I feel like publishing is always evolving. So I don't know if I can say that like middle grade is evolving more or less rapidly than kind of anything else in publishing. I mean, I think it probably has its own trends, but it also has things that are evergreen as well. As far as a middle grade golden age, I've definitely heard that phrase used, but I think lots of people use it to mean lots of different things. Some people use it to refer to the quality of middle grade that's out there. Some people use it to refer to, oh, middle grade's more hot right now and you'll probably get a bigger advance, so you should write middle grade instead. Or like, I think people throw that phrase around to mean a lot of different things, and so I'm a little bit wary of using it. What I can say is that middle grade as a category is awesome, and the books that people are writing are great, and I love the diversity and variety of storytelling that we see in middle grade. I love the sense of adventure that you see, how it can be heartwarming or complex and deep, how it can help children tackle difficult topics. Like, it can kind of do anything. But I think that's also true of a lot of different publishing. So I don't really know that it's something that's necessarily unique to middle grade either. That was a very waffly answer. Sorry.
Well, I totally agree with you in that a golden age is a very kind of broad way to say it, but to be obnoxious, yes, this isn't a golden age because Karah, AJ, and I heard it. But kind of echoing what you what Karah said, though, was it's really amazing to me having kind of grown up with a dearth of middle grades that reflected stories like my own, to suddenly see, oh my gosh, so much cool stuff out there. And not even just like books about like how hard it is to be, a Filipino American girl. It's like, no, they're now, fighting dragons and doing all this really cool stuff. So it's so amazing to see what's out there.
Yeah, I basically just echo all of this. I think much like YA and other age categories, middle grade is expanding the voices that we're hearing from, the perspectives that we're getting in stories, both contemporary and in other genres. And like Tracy said too, like there are some great books out there that are focused on experiences of identity and coming of age, but there are also wonderful fantasy stories or historicals or anything where the characters just to get to be who they are, but they're also like riding dragons or fighting demons or something. So I want to say it's a golden age, but I hope this age continues, and because I feel like we're not there yet. I mean, publishing has made good strides to try to be more diverse and inclusive of other people's experiences, but I think we're just at the start of this and we need to keep going. So if we're in a golden age now, I hope that it continues and it continues to expand.
I always say that about same thing with like adult crime fiction. It's like it's a trend. I don't want it to be a trend. I want it to be a status quo, And so we will have to see, because it seems like now they're buying them, but they also have to promote them and and market them and do everything too. So that has to be done as well. It's not just enough to buy inclusive stories. So Susan, how involved are you with your mentees after the mentorship period is over? I just want to say this, there is no requirement for mentors to continue to be very actively involved in their mentees' work. You know, some do, some don't. So I just want to be clear that if you do get a mentor like that, that's great, but that's not a requirement. So you guys feel free to answer.
Yeah, with the people that I've mentored in the past, it kind of varies. I try to make myself as open as possible if they have questions, because I feel like this industry is very opaque at times. And especially when you get into the going on sub to publisher stage of things, there are fewer and fewer resources that you can Google to find answers to your questions. So having been there and having asked people who got there before me and getting that information that I needed for myself, I try to be open to that. I know Lynn specifically, when they went to auction, had questions about my publisher, who was one of the publishers that wanted to purchase Lynn's book, and I was able to give my background experience, having worked with them for about a year at that point. But it entirely depends for me on how much the mentee feels they want to reach out to me afterward. I do try to keep in touch with everyone and to see how they're doing. But at least in terms of how I approach it, it's more up to the mentee whether they want to continue interacting or not.
Yeah, I think that's about the same as what I found, because I was with a different mentorship program called Right Mentor before I mentored. Yeah, cool. Before I was a Pitch Wars mentor, so I've been through it a couple times. I mean, I think part of it is just both of my mentees are now agented, and so once they have an agent, there's kind of less that I can or should be doing from like an editorial standpoint, because they'll be working with their agent on revisions anyway, and then working with their editor on revisions. So like, there's just less that they need from me that I did when I was actively helping critique the manuscript during the Pitch Wars period. But I agree about just when it comes to industry advice and navigating all the very confusing things and quirks that happen in this industry, like I always want to be available to help with that. I think one of my mentees actually emailed me for advice on how to move to New Zealand. So I did that too.
That's so funny.
It's really however much they need me. I'm not, when that mentorship period is over, it's not like I'm going to block them or stop responding to their emails. So, I with a previous mentee, we kind of catch up now and then. When she got some agent offers, we kind of talked about etiquette, like how to, let everybody know what's going on. Here's some template language you can use, and just general cheerleading if they need it. Because I think everyone needs some good writer buddies now and then, because trying to explain some of this to somebody who's not kind of in the writing publishing space, like they don't get it. They don't get the stress of it sometimes.
So good answers. So next question's from Joseph again. And a middle grade submission, is there a common place where you see a story stumble? Good question, Joseph.
That's a really good question.
I want to say there's sometimes where if I get to the end of the first couple chapters and I don't know what the character wants, if I don't know like what they're trying to do and what their kind of inner or outer goal is, like that's kind of where I've seen a couple places stumble, is like they'll be thrown into, another world or something, but like, what do they want to do there? I'm not really sure. Do they want to stay? Do they want to leave? Like, that's kind of one place that I see a couple stories stumble.
Yeah, I feel like in general, beginnings are just really hard. I know that I rewrote my beginning to A Wolf for a Spell like probably twice as much as anything else in the book. Like, beginnings are just really hard. So that's something that we try to keep in mind, even as we're reading the pages as well, is like, it's voice, yes, but like if it's if how the character journey or plot is lacking or we're confused, that's not necessarily a deal breaker, just because we do know that beginnings are really hard. But yeah, I would agree that like in middle grade, I'm a member of a book Facebook book group, which is a bunch of parents who kind of say, my kid loves dragon books and just finished all of the Wings of Fire. What should they read next? And people pile in and give comments about what they should read next. And somebody posted in there recently that said, I think I've figured out why my kids complain that a book is slow or not. And she said, it doesn't necessarily have to do with how much action the first chapter has. It has to do with whether they get a sense of where the story is going.
Mm.
And I was like, I was just like, oh my gosh. Because I think that's absolutely true, is that your beginning of your story is setting up expectations that will either be subverted or fulfilled over the course of the story. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. So yeah, it's that kind of transition from like all the setup into, yeah, okay, this story is actually like on the move, that can be tricky for people, for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. With beginnings are tricky, especially, and this might just be me because I'm coming more from a YA and adult background and then ended up getting published in middle grade first, but finding that really great balance of keeping the story moving at the beginning, but also giving your audience enough information so that they know what's going on and what your character wants and where this might be going is tricky. And you don't want to leave them with too many questions. I mean, I think with books for older readers, you can kind of let them stew for a couple chapters basically and then reveal things. But in middle grade, with the introduction to the character, the family dynamics, their social circles and stuff like that, you have to kind of get to that right away. So there might be instances where I read a manuscript and I'm a little confused about how everyone relates to one another. And then I would say too, in the middle, I see a lot of stumbles. People call it the murky middle for a reason. Sometimes people either skip things in order to get to the ending because they just aren't quite sure what they should put there, or it drags on a little too long. And that might be an issue of story structure. Like in my second book, I had a kind of a very loose 3-act structure, and my editor was like, have you thought of a 5-act structure? Because the middle's just like humongous compared to the rest of it. And that kind of blew my mind because I didn't know a 5-act structure existed at the time. So I quickly Googled. So yeah, I think there are a lot of different areas where middle grade stories can stumble, but most of them are things that can be worked on in revision.
Nice. I saw we had a question. I'm not going to put it up about if you guys give out feedback, and I think Sarah answered in there, but I'm going to say this too. We actually asked mentors not to say if they give feedback or not. It's completely optional. And so if a mentor does, then that's consider that to be an extra special treat. I think sometimes people think like, why can't they just give feedback? It should be so easy. Some mentors have hundreds of submissions, but even if they don't, they also have families and they have their own writing and they have work. And so unfortunately, we can't make them or expect them to be able to donate any more of their time than we're already asking them, because we're asking so much for them to do that. So that's why we asked them not to tell you, and also just to ask you not expect it and not to get angry, because people get angry if they don't do it. All right, so next question this is a fun one from DT. If you could collaborate with any artist outside of the world of writing about your writing, who would you want and why? Like a visual artist, an actor, a composer, anyone like fun? It could just be a quick, fun one since we're running out of time.
Jim Henson.
That's so cool.
I have no idea how we would collaborate.
Dumb. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to throw out like a figure skater named like Adam Rippon. I would love to work with him on something, but I have no idea how we would collaborate. So.
It's in the universe now, AJ, so it's going to happen. Maybe they're watching. Quickly, do you guys have any tips for a good comp title?
Yes, I can speak about this one because this was a thing that I found so difficult. And it was my agent who actually opens this up for me. I think people focus a lot when it comes to comps on specific plot styles and themes. So it was like, for me, A Wolf for a Spell is animal point of view and a Russian fairy tale retelling. And so I was like obsessed with like, what are books that are Russian fairy tales? And so I used like Egg and Spoon and I can't remember the other one. A Question of Magic by Edie Baker, because those were both specifically Baba Yaga stories. And my agent actually, when I was having calls with her, she was like, when she was talking about her revision so that she was going to propose, so this was before I had even become her client, the way that she pitched it to me was, she said, I want to pitch this book to publishers as The Girl Who Drank the Moon meets Pax. And she was like, have you read either of those? And I said, no, I hadn't. And she was like, have a read, see what you think. And the funny thing was neither of those books directly dealt with things like Russian fairy tales. But as soon as I read them, I could see exactly why she called them comps. And it was things like, is the voice style similar? Is it action-packed, or is it thoughtful, or is it literary, or it has much more to do with how does the story make you feel as you're reading? And that's something that I think comps can be so helpful for, is it's like, somebody loved this style of book. Now I, the bookseller or the librarian or the teacher, am going to also recommend this style of book because they loved this other one. And sometimes that's because, like, oh, they loved princesses, here's another princess book. But don't get too hung up on that. It can be a lot of different things. So if you're not finding something that exactly fits what you're talking about, I'd say think about tone and voice style and things like that.
Cool.
I will
Else?
echo that, because mine is a contemporary fantasy, and one of the comps that we use is not a fantasy at all, but I think the style, the pacing, just kind of even the way the language flows like that, that's what drew us to that comp.
I hate this happens in adult crime fiction sometimes. Like, there'll be like a big book by like a Black author, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, because you're also Black, we're gonna just put your book as a comp. And it's just like, that's so offensive. But so don't do that. Don't just pick the biggest book by whatever marginalization your main character is. So we are done. So I have one final question for you that Sarah always asks. What is your single best query tip? And then also let us know how we can find you guys online in case people have questions. I'm going to start with Tracy.
Single best query tip I have is to actually have folks who haven't read your book, like writer friends who haven't read your book, read your query and see if they're able to kind of figure it out. Because you're going to have to distill your concept in like a really, really short paragraph. And what I found is sometimes I'm so in my head that I'm like, oh, they'll totally get this. Or like, no, Tracy, these sentences don't make sense next to each other. So having somebody new to the material can really help just like really pack some punch into the very short space you have. I am on Twitter at Tracy B. Writes. I am on Instagram at Tracy Badua Writes. And my Pitch Wars wish list is on my website, tracybadua.com.
Thank you, Tracy. AJ, you want to go next?
Sure. So I feel like the pitch part of a query letter has a couple elements that you can break it down into. You want to intro your character and what they want or their goal, what's standing in their way, which is kind of considered obstacles, and then what are the stakes? What happens if they succeed or fail? And that sounds super simple in my head, but it's also probably vague and hard for you to kind of conceptualize. So a good thing that I've found to do is to go to a bookstore or your bookshelf or something and read books in the same age category and genre that have a summary on the inside of the dust jacket flap, and see if you can find those elements within the book and just kind of analyze it and see how that they do that, because that's kind of essentially what the pitch part of your query is going to be. Is hopefully if you're really on, it will one day be on a book jacket. So yeah, and then in terms of where to find me online, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and somewhat TikTok as Matoka, which is Matokah. And I think I'm on Facebook as author AJ. And then let me get Nicole's too. So Nicole's Twitter is Nico Melleby. So it's Neeko, and then Nicole's last name Melleby. And then on Instagram, Nicole is just Nicole Melleby.
Cool. Thank you, AJ and Karah.
Yeah, so a thing that especially because we're looking at fantasy, something that a lot of fantasy writers and struggled with is how to cram so much information into a query letter. And the thing that I have consistently seen elevate queries that I've worked on, because I've done a lot of query feedback things even outside of Pitch Wars, is focus just on the first act and see if that cleans up the query. You don't need to go all the way through to the final conflict of the story. Like, you can, if you focus on where the story is going at the end of the first act, that can really help just distill the information down and simplify things, and you're not trying to explain 1,000 different things in such a short word count. So that's something I have found really useful. It's not going to work for everybody, but if you're really struggling with how to fit lots of information, that can be a thing that can work quite well. So you'll find our wish list at karahsutton.com. I'm on Twitter at Karadactyl, KARAHDACTYL. I'm on Instagram at Karadactyl Author. Gracie is on Twitter at Gracie Kim. That's GRACI Kim, KIM, and she's on Instagram at Gracie Kim Writes.
Awesome. Well, you guys, thank you so much. It was such a great conversation, both this hour and the previous hour. As a reminder, Pitch Wars submissions open September 26th. I looked, it's definitely September 26th at, I guess, 12:01, and it's open for 3 days. If you have questions, the best thing to do is to go to pitchwars.org. We have a new here section, and we also have an FAQ, so definitely check those out. If you can't find the answer there, you can always DM us at Pitch Wars on Twitter, or email us at pitchwars@gmail.com. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's submissions and seeing you guys enjoy your wish list and everything. So thank you guys so much for doing this. All right, bye guys. I'm going to end the broadcast. And also thanks to J.A. Crawford for being the Twitter captain, for DT for manning the comments, and Sarah snuck in and they were also in the comments. So thank you guys. All right, so bye you guys.